Mexico may really surprise you. Now, I mean, if you've eaten a lot of Mexican-American food, it's all covered with that melted cheese, and who doesn't love it? Well, when you come to Mexico, you may really be surprised. This is not the land of melted cheese. In fact, this is the land of fresh cheese. But even those words may sound kind of foreign to you. No doubt you have eaten fresh cheese. I mean, you've probably all eaten cottage cheese, that's a fresh cheese, or ricotta, or even that mozzarella that is so popular these days. That's a fresh cheese. And here in Mexico, people love the fresh cheeses that they can consume the same day that they're made. I'm going to take you to a rural Oaxacan village and show you how these cheeses have been made for centuries. This is Rojas de Guaatemoc. It's a tiny village, but there's a large concentration of expert cheesemakers here. It's a town that revolves around dairy farms, and it all begins with what many of the dairy cows eat, and that's alfalfa. The dairy farmers here grow and harvest alfalfa in a very traditional and sustainable method, and the resulting milk and the cheese that comes from it is simply outstanding. I went to the homestead of Marina Rojas Torres, a direct descendant of the village's founder, and she showed me her method for making classic queso fresco, fresh cheese.
El proceso de hacer el queso fresco.
She starts with that beautiful, fresh milk in a large bucket, slightly cooled from the cow's body temperature. Added to that is the rennet enzyme, soaked in traditional style from bull stomach. After about 15 minutes, the milk is set like a soft gelatin, and she starts straining off some of the whey that separates. Next, she scoops the cheese curd into a muslin-lined tray, and at this point, it has the texture of a creamy flan. She wraps up the muslin cloth and presses and squeezes out as much whey as possible. Then she kneads the curds with some salt and presses it into a plastic ring. After about 30 minutes or so, the cheese is set, and it's ready for her to sell. Just around the corner is Marina's neighbor and another expert cheesemaker, Elizabeth Bautista Romero. She showed me her process for making quesillo, that famous Oaxacan string cheese. Elizabeth also starts by coagulating the milk from her cows with rennet soaked from dried bull stomach. And like her neighbor Marina, she breaks up the curd and presses out the whey to make fresh and tasty queso fresco. Now, to turn this queso fresco into quesillo takes both time and experience. The cheese curd needs to stand for 24 hours to gain that characteristic tanginess and rich flavor. The next step is all about practiced technique. She pours boiling hot water over those cheese curds and uses a wooden spoon to work it into a large, soft ball. With the heat of that water, that cheese begins to melt and become elastic. And she starts to pull it into one very long, flat rope. It's dipped briefly into cold water to firm it up, and then laid out onto a tray. Finally, she salts it and rolls it into 2 large balls of that beautiful quesillo cheese. Let's talk about cheese making at home, because it actually is something that you can tackle. There's a couple of very simple and delicious fresh cheeses that you can pretty easily make. But there's one thing to keep in mind about cheese making at home, and that is the cheese you turn out will never be better than the milk you start with. So here's the things that I look for when I'm choosing milk. The first is that it's vat pasteurized at a low temperature. You won't be particularly successful making cheese with ultra pasteurized or high temperature pasteurized milk. The second is grass-fed, and you'll always find that the milk from a grass-fed herd is the most delicious. It'll change slightly through the seasons as the diet of those dairy animals changes. The next is non-homogenized. And non-homogenized milk will give you the firmest curd when you're making your cheese. And the last is that it's organic, which means it comes from a herd that has been well taken care of. And it says cream top, which of course comes from the fact that this milk is non-homogenized. And I'm gonna need to shake it really well before I pour it into the pot where we're gonna make the cheese. I've got a gallon of cold milk now in this heavy pot, and then I'm adding a quart of buttermilk because it's going to give a tanginess that is going to be very reminiscent of the kinds of cheeses that I've always had in Mexico. But I'm also going to squeeze limes, enough to make a half a cup of lime juice, add it to the pot, and then start heating the milk because the curd is made by adding a little bit of lime juice to it. Pour in the fresh lime juice. Turn on the heat. I want it to be about medium. I've already positioned my thermometer, and you need to have a reliable thermometer because you're going to bring the temperature slowly up to about 190. As it hits about 160 degrees, and that'll take about 20 minutes or so, it will start to steam a little bit, and you'll notice that their curds will begin to form on the top. When it hits 190, they should be firm enough that we'll start to take them off and put them into a cheesecloth line strainer. Now let this drain for about half an hour or so. Then put it in the refrigerator and let it chill, and you're gonna have the most delicious fresh whole milk ricotta, or what they call requesón in Mexico. You'll love it. Now I'm gonna take you from that whole milk ricotta to the classic Mexican queso fresco. It's a little bit more complex, but it's certainly within easy reach of any home cheesemaker. The first thing that I've done is to heat milk, that good local milk, to 90 degrees. And now I'm going to set it or coagulate it with rennet. You can easily find animal or vegetable rennet online. I'm going to put 1/4 teaspoon of this animal rennet into the barely warm milk. Stir it around, and then I'm going to let it sit for about an hour. The curd is set now. You can see that it's in sort of one huge gelled mass. Now, just like they do in Mexico, I'm going to break the curd up with my hand. I'm using my fingers sort of like a comb, just cutting through the curd. I'm going to keep working it until I get it broken up into pieces that are about the size of a pea. Our next step here is to remove the curds from the whey using that skimmer. At this point, it'll look a little bit like cottage cheese. And then I'm going to start collecting the edges of the cheesecloth so that you can start the gentle pressing of the whey. You want to press whey out of this until the cheese curd is the consistency of what we would call farmer's cheese or dry cottage cheese. Our final step in making our queso fresco is to add some salt to it, or if you want to make what's called queso botanero in Mexico, little snacking cheese, we'll add some other flavorings. But first we've got to get the basic seasoning in here. So unwrap the cheesecloth from the pressed curds. Make sure to get out all the little bits and pieces from the corners. Now I'm going to kind of break it up. I'm going to sprinkle it with some flake salt. You could use any kind of non-iodized salt for this. Then sort of knead that salt into the curd until it's well distributed. We need to form our queso fresco. And what I've done is to just get some small cans and cut the top and bottom out of them so that we have something that's sort of the traditional queso fresco shape. And I'm going to pack some of our simply salted curd and then press it very gently with your hands to pack it down. As you let this sit for the next hour or so, you'll notice a little whey will continue to separate out at the bottom. To make the flavored queso fresco, the queso botanero, we need to chop up some chilies. And typically, you will find a red chili used in there, red jalapeno, or I'm using a red fresno here, and some herbs. Classic is epazote, but you could easily use cilantro in its place. These red fresnos aren't as hot as I would like them to be, so I'm going to chop up a little habanero to add interest and spice. I'm going to put 2 can molds on our tray and then line the bottom of them with a single layer of the red Fresno slices and pack the curds into the molds. These need to be refrigerated for about an hour for them to completely firm up before we serve them. I say the grill has great potential for grilling ingredients that go into salsas. So I'm going to show you 2 grilled salsas. One's going to seem fairly regular to you in the sense that it starts with tomatoes, some green chilies, poblanos here, some onion, garlic, cilantro, and lime. The other one sort of veers off in a different direction. We're going to grill some tomatillos for that one, some pineapple, red onion, jicama, the crunchy root vegetable that I'm in love with, and flavor it with the smoky chipotle chilies. Now the first steps that I have to do is to prepare some of these ingredients to get them ready to go onto the grill. Now the items that are not going to get grilled that we'll come back to in just a minute, the chipotle and the jicama, I'm going to set to the side. For this tray it's the cilantro and the lime, and then we'll head to the grill to grill the rest of it. Now this is all dry grilling. There's no oil on anything at this point, but we're going to turn these, letting them char on the outside, even blacken and blister in a few spots. But we want everything to get soft. Now, the vegetables have cooled off just a little bit, at least enough for them to be handleable. And I have the second step of preparation for them, which is in some of these vegetables to peel them. I'm going to peel off the sort of charred skin from the tomatoes. I'm not going to be too meticulous about that because a little bit of that roasty flavor in the finished salsa will be very welcome. I'm going to do the same for these roasted poblano chilies. Now I'm going to open up the poblano chilies to get the seed pod out. Then I want to rinse them very briefly under cold water. And then I'm going to peel the garlic and the grilled onions. Just going to give a kind of rough chop to. And we're ready to put this salsa together. So I'm going to use the food processor to help me along in this process. I'm going to secure the top and then pulse. So we get a medium fine chop. Then I'm going to add the tomatoes to it. And continue to pulse until I get a nice coarse puree. These roasted poblano chilies, just going to cut up into thin strips. Scoop that in with the tomatoes. Give it a little bit of salt, a nice squeeze of fresh lime juice, and a little fresh chopped cilantro. And stir everything together. And what you have here is the perfect summer salsa, using the grill to add maximum flavor. Now on to the tomatillo salsa. The two ingredients that didn't go on the grill are the chipotles and the jicama. Now, if you haven't worked with jicama before, it's really easy. Such a beautiful, crisp texture, light, sweet flavor, typically eaten raw. You want to make sure that you peel it rather deeply because jicama has a fairly tough skin, so a vegetable peeler doesn't typically work for peeling jicama. Here we're going to use it to add crunch to our salsa. Now, a chipotle is a smoke-dried jalapeno, so it's always going to have the spiciness of a jalapeno, but a beautiful, beautiful smokiness. I like to cut them open so that I can scrape the seeds out and then chop them into small pieces. And all of the grilled ingredients, I'm going to hand chop. So I'm going to start with some salt there, and then this little bit of sugar is not only going to bring out the flavor of the pineapple, but it's also going to balance that natural acidity of the tomatillos. Stir it up, and you'll see we've got a kind of chunky, I'd say modern looking salsa here. Super, super delicious. So if you've ever been to our restaurant and tasted the amazing salad greens that we have to offer there, well, this is the place that they come from. This is the production garden in my backyard. And I don't take any credit for them. It's all the handiwork of Bill Shores, who manages all of our garden projects and I think is the most amazing salad green producer in the whole world. So Bill, I want you to give us all a tutorial in how you produce these gorgeous greens. Where do you start?
First of all, you need to find the right spot to grow it in. So you want a spot with full sun. And that way the greens will grow quickly and you'll get good, nice, lush growth like you see here. Second, you want to have a source of water. Salad greens are a pretty water demanding crop, and especially if you want to grow in the warmer months of the year, you're going to need to supplement rainfall. Then soil is the third thing you want to really make sure you have right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to amend the soil because we want to put nutrients back after we're taking out a crop of salad greens, so we're not just depleting the soil.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to start with some compost. This is worm compost from our worm bins. And then I'm just going to do a little bit of this organic granular fertilizer here. And we don't need a lot. Salad greens aren't a heavy feeding crop, but they just need a little bit just to help them to get that nice good growth. Just lightly work it in. We're not trying to get it deep in there. We're just, the top couple inches, work that in. Just smooth that out. Get that nice even surface. We don't want any bumps or lumps. We put our furrows, it's a little trench here for the seeds, very close together. You can see they're about 3 inches apart. Okay, so that way we can get this nice lush growth, so you get a good canopy of greens. One, you get a lot more production, and two, this shades the soil surface, keeps it moist, and also shades out weeds. So a lot of benefits. So rather than just putting the seeds directly in these little rows that we've created, we're just gonna spread the seed over the surface of the soil.
Okay.
So I'm gonna get the rake again, and I'm just gonna very gently cover these seeds. I don't want to get them too deep. Then the last step is to just take the hose with a gentle spray and just spray that soil surface. This will moisten the soil, get those seeds nice and moist so they can germinate.
And it's that gentle touch, that not bearing it too much, having really great soil, a good place to do it. And well, we found out that these raised beds really help a lot too.
Yeah, a lot of benefits to the raised beds. It protects those tiny little seedlings, so you get a heavy rain, you're not going to get a washout, soil eroding out of the bed. And also another benefit, it's going to warm up faster in the spring. The soil is going to warm up faster in the spring.
So if you don't have a lot of space, salad greens are really a good crop for you to grow because you can continuously grow it, and every 3 weeks you can get a harvest. And you can imagine just a small bed like this could actually feed your family all your salad green needs very, very easily.
A really simple salad with those great greens you brought from outside, just with a little bit of lime juice, salt, and oil.
That sounds absolutely the perfect thing that you could do with those greens. Now you could use olive oil for it, but I'm right now very into these nut oils, especially the kinds that you can find from different kinds of nut orchards that roast the nuts. Like this one is made from roasted walnuts, and it is so delicious. A little goes a really long way. While Lainey's finishing that salad, I'm going to finish the ricotta. Now you'll notice that this ricotta that I've put in this dish here, it looks a lot drier than the ricottas that you would find in our grocery stores here in the U.S. I'm going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, sprinkle on some black pepper, and some flake salt.